For a brief moment, you become convinced that the present is a memory, not a metaphor, not a feeling that resembles memory, an actual certainty that what is happening right now has already happened. The strange part is not that the feeling appears. The strange part is how convincing it is. You do not stop and debate it. You do not weigh evidence. You simply know. The certainty arrives first. The explanation comes later. Then, almost immediately, the certainty collapses. You realize you've never been in this room. You've never had this conversation. You've never watched this exact sequence of events unfold, and yet something inside you had already stamped the moment as familiar, as remembered, as known. For centuries, people have treated this experience as a clue, a glimpse of a past life, a fracture in time, a memory from somewhere beyond ordinary awareness. Because when it happens, it doesn't feel like imagination. It feels like recognition. The question is why? Why can a completely new moment arrive carrying the emotional weight of a memory that doesn't exist? If you pay attention to the experience itself, something curious stands out. Déjà vu does not feel like ordinary remembering. When you remember your first day at school or a conversation from last week, the memory arrives attached to details. There is a place, a time, a sequence of events. You know where the memory belongs. The familiarity is there, but the source is missing. It's as though your mind has produced the conclusion before providing the evidence. That alone is strange, but the deeper mystery is that your brain normally performs this task remarkably well. Every second of every day, it is making judgments about what is familiar and what is new. You walk into your kitchen and immediately recognize it as your kitchen. You hear a friend's voice on the phone and know who it belongs to before consciously thinking about it. You glance at your phone and recognize your own wallpaper without effort. These experiences feel instantaneous because most of the machinery involved operates beneath awareness. Long before conscious thought catches up, your brain is already sorting, comparing, matching, and predicting. In many ways, familiarity is one of its most important shortcuts. Without it, every object, face, and environment would need to be analyzed from scratch. The world would feel endlessly unfamiliar, exhausting. Instead, the brain constantly asks a simple question: have I encountered something like this before? Most of the time, the answer arrives quietly and accurately. You never notice the process working, just as you rarely notice your heartbeat until something feels different. Déjà vu may be one of those moments when you catch the system in the act. Researchers have spent decades investigating what creates this peculiar feeling. One clue emerged from studies of memory itself. Memory is not a single process. What feels like remembering is actually the cooperation of multiple systems performing different jobs. One system helps reconstruct specific experiences. Another generates a more general feeling of familiarity. Usually these systems work together so smoothly that they appear to be one thing. You recognize a face. The feeling of familiarity appears. Memories connected to that person follow. The experience feels seamless, but neuroscience suggests these processes can sometimes separate. The feeling can arrive without the memory, recognition without recollection, a signal without a source. Imagine hearing an echo before hearing the original sound. That is roughly how bizarre the experience becomes. Some researchers believe déjà vu occurs when the brain's familiarity system briefly misfires or activates at the wrong moment. The signal that normally tells you, you've encountered this before, appears even though no matching memory exists. The result is a strange contradiction. Part of the brain is declaring the present moment familiar, another part cannot find evidence to support the claim. For a few seconds, both messages coexist. You feel certainty and confusion simultaneously, yet familiarity alone may not tell the entire story. Because your brain is not merely remembering the world, it is constantly trying to predict it. Modern neuroscience increasingly describes perception as an active process rather than a passive one. Your brain is continuously generating expectations about what will happen next, comparing those expectations against incoming information, and updating its model of reality. Most of this occurs invisibly. You are not consciously predicting the next word in a sentence, the next step on a staircase, or the next expression on a familiar face. Your brain is doing it automatically, moment after moment, day after day, and occasionally something unusual may happen. A prediction becomes so closely aligned with reality that the experience feels strangely pre-known, not because you actually lived the moment before, but because some part of your mind anticipated aspects of it before conscious awareness arrived. The result is an experience that feels almost impossible to describe. Not a memory, not a prediction, something caught between the two. A moment that seems to arrive twice, once beneath awareness, and then again in consciousness, which raises an even more unsettling possibility. If the feeling of certainty can emerge before understanding, how often might that happen in other parts of your life without you ever noticing? At first glance, déjà vu seems harmless, a curious glitch, a brief oddity, something you mention to a friend and then forget a few hours later. But the experience points towards something much larger, because the most important part of déjà vu is not the feeling itself, it is what the feeling reveals. For a few seconds, you become aware of something that is normally hidden, the fact that your sense of reality is not arriving fully formed from the outside world. It is being assembled, interpreted, predicted, and most of that process happens before you know it. Déjà vu simply makes the machinery visible. The familiarity signal arrives without a clear reason, exposing a system that is always operating in the background. A system that influences far more than memory. It shapes perception itself. Consider how often you enter situations already carrying expectations. You meet someone new and within minutes begin forming impressions. You walk into a room and sense whether it feels welcoming or tense. You open a message and think you already know what the sender means before reaching the end of the sentence. Much of daily life unfolds through these rapid predictions. Usually they are useful. They allow you to move through the world efficiently. But they also influence what you notice, what you ignore, and what you believe is happening. Two people can witness the same event and walk away with entirely different interpretations. Not because one is lying, not because one is irrational, but because each brain is filtering reality through different expectations. In a sense, perception is never purely about what is in front of you. It is also about what your mind anticipated finding there. The same principle extends into identity. You often imagine yourself as someone who consciously chooses your thoughts, opinions, and decisions. Yet many of those processes begin before awareness enters the picture. A conversation triggers an emotion, an expression on someone's face activates an assumption, a familiar situation evokes an old pattern of behavior. Only afterward does the conscious mind begin constructing a story about why you reacted the way you did. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as post hoc explanation. The narrative comes after the response, not always before it. That realization can feel uncomfortable because it challenges a deeply held intuition. The intuition that awareness is always in charge. Déjà vu quietly suggests otherwise. For a brief moment, it demonstrates that certainty can appear before explanation. The feeling arrives, the reasoning follows, and perhaps that sequence is not unique to déjà vu. Perhaps it is happening more often than you realize. In arguments, in relationships, in fears, in ambitions, in countless judgments that feel self-evident in the moment. The strange experience of déjà vu may be rare, but the hidden processes it reveals are with you every day, working beneath the surface, helping construct the reality you experience, and occasionally shaping it without your permission. Most people respond to experiences like déjà vu by asking what they mean. Was it a sign, a message, a glimpse of something hidden? But there is another possibility. Instead of treating the experience as evidence of something beyond the mind, you can treat it as an invitation to observe the mind itself. Because the real value of déjà vu may not be the feeling it creates, it may be the perspective it offers. For a few seconds, the usual illusion breaks. You catch a glimpse of how much of your experience is being generated beneath awareness. Not just memories, not just familiarity, the entire stream of interpretation that accompanies daily life. And once you notice that, a subtle shift becomes possible. You become less interested in the feeling itself and more interested in the process behind it. The same curiosity that can be applied to déjà vu can be applied elsewhere, to assumptions, to reactions, to beliefs that seem obviously true. You begin asking different questions, not why do I feel this, but what produced this feeling, not is this thought correct, but why does this thought seem convincing? At first, the distinction appears small. In practice, it changes everything, because awareness creates a little space between the experience and the interpretation, a moment of observation before identification. You notice an emotional reaction before becoming completely absorbed by it. You notice an old fear before automatically obeying it. You notice a familiar story about yourself before accepting it as fact. This is not control, at least not in the way people often imagine. The goal is not to dominate the mind or eliminate its automatic processes. Most of those processes exist for good reason. They help you navigate a complex world. The shift is simpler than that. You learn to see them, and seeing changes the relationship. The familiarity signal still appears. The prediction still forms. The emotional reaction still arrives. But now there is an observer present. A part of you that recognizes these experiences as events occurring within consciousness rather than unquestionable truths about reality. In that sense, déjà vu offers an unexpected lesson. Not that the mind is unreliable, but that the mind is active, creative, constantly constructing, and the moment you become aware of that construction, you begin participating in it more consciously. Perhaps the reason déjà vu lingers in memory is that it briefly exposes something we are not supposed to notice. Not a crack in reality, a crack in certainty. For most of your life, experience arrives already interpreted. The world appears solid, immediate, self-evident. You see a face and recognize it. You hear a sentence and understand it. You move through familiar places without questioning how familiarity itself is created. The machinery remains hidden. Then, for a few strange seconds, déjà vu pulls back the curtain. A moment feels remembered before it can be remembered. A certainty appears before its explanation, and suddenly, the process becomes visible. The experience is unsettling because it reveals that consciousness is not simply receiving reality, it is participating in its construction. Neuroscience shows that the brain is constantly comparing, predicting, interpreting, and updating its model of the world. Psychology reveals how those hidden processes shape perception, judgment, and identity. And philosophy has long wrestled with a similar realization, that what feels most immediate and obvious is not always the thing itself but our experience of it. These perspectives do not make life less meaningful. If anything, they make it more remarkable, because the familiar world you inhabit each day is not passively observed. It is actively created through an ongoing conversation between your brain, your memories, your expectations, and the reality unfolding around you. Déjà vu is one of the rare moments when that conversation becomes audible, a fleeting reminder that there is more happening beneath awareness than awareness itself can see, and perhaps that is the deeper lesson. Not that you should distrust your mind, but that you should remain curious about it. The feeling of certainty is powerful, yet certainty is not always the beginning of understanding. Sometimes it is the thing that must be examined. The next time a moment feels strangely familiar, you may still experience that brief jolt of recognition, that sense that somehow, impossibly, you have been here before. But perhaps you will also notice something else, a quiet reminder that beneath every thought, every perception, and every certainty lies an invisible process, tirelessly constructing your experience of reality. And for a moment, you get to see it working. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy exploring the hidden architecture of the mind, consider subscribing to Selvion. New explorations every week at the intersection of neuroscience, philosophy, and human experience. Until next time, stay curious.